Good to see you again, Mr. Isaacman. You may recounter that during your last nomination hearing, you refused to confirm whether Elon Musk, with whom you have deep personal and financial ties, was present at the meeting that then President-elect Trump offered you the job of NASA administrator. So I wanted to give you one more chance to set the record straight. Was Elon Musk in the meeting at Mar-a-Lago when President Trump offered you the job?
Senator, it's great to have a conversation again. I thought we really ran this one to ground last time, but what I will tell you, Senator, and I wish I had the opportunity to explain it further before, is my first interview with the president, I think I've had several opportunities since to re-engage, was in a ballroom type setting, Senator. There were dozens of people moving in and out that I would not say were in the meeting.
It's a very simple question. Was President Trump in the room when, was Elon Musk in the room when President Trump offered you the job?
Senator, my interview, my conversations with the president, and there were dozens of people moving in and out of the room, and I don't think it's fair to bring any of them into this matter.
So you once again, you're refusing to tell us whether Elon Musk was in the room that day. And that actually makes me think that Elon Musk was in the room that day, but that you understand that it's a clear conflict of interest that he was there. You're asking us to confirm you as the next NASA administrator, and SpaceX gets $15 billion from American taxpayers for its business with NASA. You also have multiple financial relationships with Elon Musk, including investments in SpaceX, a contract between his company Starlink and your payments company, and even more, you bought space flights from SpaceX. Mr. Isaacman, what was the value of these contracts for space flights with SpaceX?
Well, I mean, Senator, just to clarify on these points, I have no direct or indirect equity exposure to any aerospace company, including SpaceX. I have disclosed all of my financial ties to the ethics officials at NASA, as well as the Office of Government Ethics. They've generated an ethics letter. I fully intend to adhere to it. I more than acknowledge that I went to space twice with SpaceX, but I point out they're the only company capable of sending astronauts to and from space since the shuttle was retired. My relationship with them is no different than NASA's. In fact, if there was more than one company, I suspect I would have paid less.
So what was the value of the contracts for space flights with SpaceX?
I mean, Senator, I don't think it's lost on anyone that going to and from space is rather expensive. We never disclosed the...
Well, your financial paperwork suggests it was over $50 million. So was it $100 million? Was it $200 million?
Senator, we've never disclosed it other than the fact that we were able to raise substantially more than the cost of the mission for charitable causes like St. Jude.
So you won't tell us how much you paid the man who publicly campaigned for your nomination. Will you request that SpaceX release you?
They didn't give me a discount, Senator.
I appreciate that, but you were paying him. Will you request that SpaceX release you from the NDA so that you can provide the committee with this information?
Senator, I will commit to always work with the appropriate ethics professionals to make sure I'm, continuously in compliance with my ethics agreement.
Will you ask him to release you from the NDA so that you can provide that information to the committee?
I have no issue asking them to release me from non-disclosure, Senator.
Okay, that would be helpful. Mr. Isaacman, can you tell us, since President Trump initially withdrew your nomination, have you had any communication with Mr. Musk about the job of NASA administrator?
I have not, Senator.
You have not. So the American people actually deserve to know how much money you have spent personally on SpaceX, and whether the head of SpaceX and Starlink, Elon Musk, was personally involved in your nomination, because we're looking at conflicts of interest so big that they have their own center of gravity, and we just have to make sure that it's all out there and it's fully understood by the American people. And since your last nomination, we've received the president's 2026 budget request, which proposes a nearly 50% cut to NASA's science funding. Do you support President Trump's proposal to cut NASA's science funding in half?
Senator, I certainly support the president's goal of reducing the deficit and shrinking our national debt. Now, an awful lot has happened from the initial presidential budget request to the continuing resolution that we've been operating into the one big beautiful bill that has plussed up additional funding for NASA. So I would, if I'm confirmed, I'd love to get my arms around where we are presently at.
Well, a 50% cut to the NASA science budget is dramatic. And considering reports about your, quote, Project Athena plan for NASA, which literally banks on the decimation of our scientific abilities, among other things, this document calls for NASA to stop collecting its own data and instead set up a taxpayer-funded subscription service from private companies for their products, companies that will set their own price for data that NASA needs to function on an ongoing basis. Would Starlink or SpaceX be companies that NASA would potentially have to turn to obtain data?
Well, Senator, first of all, I think pretty much everything you just said there was not correct. What that draft document contemplated was working with commercial companies for certain types of Earth observation data, not SpaceX or Starlink. I think I specifically called out Planet and Black Sky as examples of companies that might be able to deliver Earth observation and climate science data at lower cost, specifically to free up resources for other planetary science missions that commercial companies are not capable of doing.
Well, I would say this, the proposal, and this is the truth, the proposal would strip NASA for parts and instead transfer taxpayer funds directly to the bank accounts of Starlink and SpaceX, companies owned by the very same man who may or may not have been in the room when Trump offered you the job. And we're just going to have to keep a very close eye on what will unfold at NASA if you are confirmed. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Budd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. Mr. Isaacman, great to see you again. Let's talk about NASA's Quest program of quiet supersonic. You know, it's designed to de-risk the science, validate the quiet supersonic technologies, and then let American industries like Boom, for instance, which has a presence in North Carolina, let them take the lead in building the commercial market. So as administrator, how will you ensure that NASA stays focused on enabling that new industry and avoids creating unintentional regulatory or technical barriers for the next generation supersonic flight?
Well, Senator, this is certainly a subject that I'm pretty passionate about. I do think it's NASA's job, I believe it's funded by taxpayers, to explore the near impossible in air and space. And when they arrive at a major development and that capability is mature enough to hand it off to industry where competition can drive innovation and bring down costs. X-59 is an interesting example. There is some overlap with what Boom's doing. I think actually Boom is an extraordinary company. I'd love to see a lot more American companies trying to break the status quo and take on big, bold projects like that. I think NASA just needs a lot more X-planes, honestly. That was a really exciting one that we all had an opportunity to watch rather recently alongside the recent performance from Boom. But I'd love to see us have multiple programs that are exploring radical designs in airframe and propulsion. And when they do have those breakthroughs, not dissimilar to the 1970s, 1980s, when NASA was experimenting with fly-by-wire and thrust vectoring capabilities that have made their way in commercial aircraft as well as military aircraft like the F-22.
Do you think there's a problem with the Quest eventually competing against Boom? Do you think that's a potential problem?
No, I would certainly hope.
I'd say the whole industry, not just Boom in particular.
I'd certainly hope not, Senator. I actually don't think NASA's at its best when it's doing what industry is doing, because at that point, talent would naturally probably gravitate to industry where they get the advantage of, who knows, appreciating stock options and such. I think NASA should constantly be recalibrating to work on that near impossible, what no one else is doing, which is going to attract that kind of exciting technology. That's going to attract that kind of talent to work on that exciting technology. When they figure it out, they hand it off to industry and they recalibrate to the next big, bold endeavor. I think that serves the talent, workforce, and the mission of NASA very well.
Thank you. You know, in your testimony earlier, you were clear that the United States is in the middle of a second space race. The great rival that you mentioned spent more than a decade establishing a space Silk Road, offering collaboration on satellite, space launch, space infrastructure development to more countries across the Middle East and North Africa. So how does this sort of space diplomacy from an adversary affect our prospects for continuing dominance in space? And what's your vision for space diplomacy of ours?
Well, Senator, I think there's a couple parts to that. So first, NASA has always been referred to, as a soft power. There's lots of diplomatic implications to their mission. A lot of our greatest endeavors are worked on with our allies across Europe, the Middle East, Canada, for example. I think what's concerning now is that some of these countries have more than one choice. So for the longest time period, America owned the ultimate high ground of space, and that attracted the interest of many nations to want to collaborate and partner with us. The Chinese do have their own space station now. They went from a single technaut in orbit approximately 20 years ago to having a space station where they're launching at an extraordinary cadence. So I think this is why there needs to be urgency to take a close look at NASA, what's going right, and do a lot more of that, and the things that are going wrong to clear those obstacles and paths so we can get back to doing, world-changing missions again.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks again for your time. Chairman?
Thank you. Senator Lujan.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so very much for that and for calling this hearing. Mr. Isaacman, welcome back to the Commerce Committee. I guess I'll just start out by simply asking, Mr. Isaacman, you believe in science?
Of course, Senator.
You support science?
I do, Senator.
You've conducted a lot of science experiments throughout not just your youth, but through your career, correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate that. Now, a few of my colleagues have raised the concern about the nearly 50% cut to NASA's Science Mission Directorate, a directorate that is explicitly foundational to NASA's 1958 Congressional Charter. I think by the very nature of the number of questions that you're receiving today from colleagues about NASA, it shows the broad support for the science mission at NASA as well. Congress has already made clear that we rejected these cuts and will continue to fund the scientific missions that uphold NASA's statutory purpose. My question, yes or no, is do you agree that NASA has a statutory obligation under its founding charter to conduct and support Earth and space science for the benefit of the nation?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate that. Now, this is going great, Mr. Isaacman. Many of NASA's science programs are not commodities. You cannot run a value-added calculation on dual-use information that supports both science discovery and national security. Now, for example, these missions provide indispensable space weather data. We were chatting about that before. I appreciate my colleague reminding us all across America when we pull out our devices or we're depending on the simple services that we interact with every day, that we're touching some of this and we depend on it. Like your friend, Mr. Musk, I would say some of the commercial actors, they depend on after solar activity has repeatedly disrupted their constellations as well. Now, NASA, Earth science assets also ensure GPS integrity, track environmental changes, everything you just described. U.S. military readiness, critically important, national security, the importance of this science directorate. So let me ask you directly, yes or no, will you execute the funds appropriated by Congress for NASA's critical science missions exactly as Congress has directed?
Yes, sir. We will maximize the scientific value of every dollar that Congress affords the agency.
I appreciate that very much. My last question is, while I didn't support the reconciliation bill that passed over the summer, there are pieces of it, particularly in NASA's section, that hold promise, and I appreciate the inclusion of them. For example, the NASA section funds a Mars telecommunications orbiter, specifically one that was proposed independently when NASA solicited its commercial industry for Mars sample return mission architecture from space. I see you nodding. You're very familiar with this, I imagine.
Reasonably familiar, Senator.
The orbiter would not only support future exploration missions, but most importantly, it would help support the critical comms relay needed for existing and future science missions like the Mars sample return. Now, New Mexico is home to companies like Rocket Lab, who produce the world's highest efficiency space-grade solar and powered critical NASA missions and would power the MTO, for example. So yes or no, do you commit to following through on the letter of the law and ensuring a rapid acquisition strategy for the MTO to be able to deliver it by the law's 2028 due date?
Senator, my commitment to you and all the other members is always to follow the law. As a space enthusiast, I am super excited about any activities that open up further science and discovery on Mars.
Appreciate that very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to start out with a kind of interesting question about agriculture data. Mr. Isaacman, I don't think many people understand that NASA's satellite data is hugely valuable for farmers. Programs like NASA Acres and NASA Harvest use satellite imaging to forecast production and monitor crop yields. I'm the ranking member on the Ag Committee, and I've introduced legislation called the Agriculture Innovation Act to strengthen that data collection. Could you talk about your plans to preserve and expand those types of monitoring programs, weather patterns and the like, and how you can better work with the Department of Agriculture?
Sure, Senator. I appreciate the question. As I mentioned with Senator Moran before, at the present time, we at least inhabit only a single planet, and it's probably important for us to continue to study it to the greatest extent possible. NASA's had a long-running program with Intelsat. I fully support that we should be gathering data that is especially contribute to hardships here on Earth. I mean, obviously, there's